we welcome Professor Mark Ferguson with his keynote called Creating the Missing Trillions. And we will hear from him which role the third mission plays for our GDP. Dear Mark, welcome. It is a pleasure having you. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the invitation to speak. I'm going to share my screen and show some slides, and I'm going to pick up on where Herman left off in his wonderful opening comments. So I'm first going to speak about the UK, and I'm picking the UK deliberately because it's probably the most advanced country in Europe in terms of spin-outs. And then I'm going to move on to Europe, and then I'm going to finish with a few words about what we do in Ireland. And the focus is, if we got this right, we could actually put trillions of euros into our economies. So I'll start by looking at the science. This is a graph that looks at the number of publications based in the US and China, and it's got the UK on there because I'm going to start with the UK. So we do pretty well, Europe, the UK, and so on, in terms of publications. We do even better when it comes to the importance of those publications, here seen as the field-weighted citation impact, a measure of how important those scientific papers are. And you can see that the UK is above the United States. You can also see that EU is around the OECD average. China is rapidly catching up. So the science is good in volume, and it's good in terms of its impact. But then let's look at the investment in the startup companies that are coming out of this research. So if you look in the 3-year period between 2015 and 2018, about half of the 250 billion that was invested across the world went to the United States, about a quarter went to China, and about a quarter went to the rest of the world, of which the UK captured 5%. So the differential in venture funding, even in the UK, which is by far and away the best European country, is 10 times what it is in the United States, yet the differential in research output as measured by the quality is at best only 2 times. And remember that those things concentrate around very good universities. So if you look now in the United States at the economic impact of these venture capital backed companies, it's about 40%, 43% of all public companies. It's about 57% of the market capitalization, 38% of the total jobs. But importantly, 82% of the R&D spending by US public firms, and much of that flows back into the university ecosystem. So this commercialization of research and innovation plays an increasingly dominant role in the US economy. It acts as a prime driver of economic growth, of value creation, and of employment. Now, I'm going to be more specific. Let's actually compare California to the UK. They're rather similar sized economies, both about $3 trillion. They both actually have similar compositions where services dominate. Each has 4 universities in the world's top 20, which I've listed on this slide. But the GDP, the gross domestic product in California, is about 74,000, 75% higher than the UK. So the California economy is growing almost twice as fast as the UK. And you can see that here on the graph, where I've graphed out the growth of the Californian economy in yellow, and the US and the UK economy in gray and blue. And if you don't like the graphs, you can actually look at the numbers, and you can see that California is growing about twice the UK. So this is the rise of the brain belts. This is the rise of the innovation clusters, because one of the great paradoxes of modern technology is that although we have this wonderful virtual technology, and I'm speaking to you virtually now, most of the knowledge economy is actually concentrated. It's concentrated in clusters around leading universities and companies, spin-out companies, and then larger companies, typically in small areas of large cities. And why is that? Well, as the Harvard professor Glaser said, it's because humans are a social species and we get smarter by being around other smart people. So universities have a key role. They're kind of like the anchor of this innovation cluster, which produces spin-outs, which then produces and attracts larger companies, which then grows the GDP, the gross domestic product of the whole country. And that's essentially where we will get the missing trillions. So we could find millions and trillions of euros if Europe was capable of commercializing innovation as effectively as the United States. And I believe that Europe has a responsibility to convert this intellectual output to maximize economic and societal gains, not just for the current population, but also for future generations. So how are we going about that? So a few words about the Innovation Council. Herman has said a few words about it. It's a one-stop shop for breakthrough innovators. It's got agile funding, aims to be agile, and it's about building ecosystems. There's a very distinguished board, which I am privileged to chair. Herman is the vice chair, and he was the chair of the board that actually produced the blueprint for the European Innovation Council. Very talented people from around Europe, from entrepreneurs, large companies, universities, and so on. And it has two simple programs. It has the accelerator program, which you see here on the right-hand side of the slide, that gives blended finance grants of up to 2.5 million plus equity of up to 15 million. And the target is companies, SMEs, spin-outs with high-risk, deep tech, real potential to grow and scale. And then it also has the Pathfinder program, grants of up to 4 million, really looking at radical new areas, aiming at disruptive technologies. That's largely in consortia of universities, university researchers, together with small companies. If you ask, how does the Pathfinder work? That's what I've just talked about. The focus is on interdisciplinary and visionary technologies. It's open in all fields. It's grants of 3 to 4 million, possible follow-on through the accelerator, coaching, mentoring. It's high-risk stuff. And if you look at the accelerator program, it's about grant funding of up to 2.5 million for a project. It's about equity of up to 15 million. It's about funding for any bottom-up area that is in deep tech. So anything, not for hairdressers or butcher shops, but really for deep tech, and access to coaching and mentoring and networks of investors and networks of corporates. And the EIC aims to be for innovators what the European Research Council has been for researchers. It really wants to be the gold standard in Europe. And how are these companies selected? Well, obviously people apply. The EIC gets about 10,000 applications per year. They're assessed through independent expert evaluators. And then there are juries. There's actually, you have to go for an interview, just like you do at the ERC. It's like a pitch you would make to an investor. And then there's a success rate, which is low. And the low success rate is a function of two things. It's a function of the selection process. It's a function of the demand that's out there for this kind of service. And it's also a function of the fact that we have to grow our own budget. We want to show some success, and we want to grow the budget for the EIC. If you're interested in it further, there is a recent impact report. Here I show the cover of it. You can get this on the European Commission website. And I'm just going to show you a few statistics from the pilot. So the first question you can ask is, have in the pilot program the EIC been successful in crowding in other investors? Crowding in the private investment is a real hallmark of what the EIC is about. So far in the pilot, we've crowded in about 4 billion, which you can see here. You can see that the graph is accelerating between 2019 and 2020. These are follow-on rounds for companies that have been invested in by the EIC. We need to do better, but it's not bad for the pilot. If you look at the top 10 EIC companies that are attracting follow-on investment, you can see them listed here together with their countries and what they've attracted. A couple of 100 million from Infarm, Tacotrek, about 62 million. If you then look at the countries, this should be of some interest to you. What countries in Europe have got European Innovation Council funding? So in the graph on the left-hand side, the blue bar represents those who actually got the funding, and the orange represents those companies that we would like to have funded if we'd had a bigger budget, and they get a seal of excellence, which in countries that have a large amount of structural funds allows the structural funds to co-invest. So have a look at Austria. Austria, there's been investment in 127 companies, 57 on the seal of excellence. Not as good as your next door neighbor, Switzerland, that's got about twice the number. Not as good as Sweden, that invests slightly more in research than you do. Similar to Ireland with 141, but I am ashamed to say Ireland invests much, much less in research than you do. We'd love to invest more, but we're very efficient in converting that into innovation. So you can have a look at these figures and see how people are going. If you look at the industries in which these companies are operating, health dominates, then energy, then software, then transportation, food. You can see that these are the data from the pilot to date. So this is the pilot phase. This year, we will have invested about 1.5 billion, which is on track for the 10 billion budget. The advisory board, we had a special focus on the Green Deal. We have a special focus to encourage women and a program with the EIT and so on. And the full EIC will be in Horizon Europe, legally established as a separate agency with a one-stop shop and some simplification of the rules and a bit more flexibility. So then finally, I'm going to close by saying something about Science Foundation Ireland. Innovation, research and innovation are key to us. So we have an annual budget of about 200 million. It should be more than that, but that's what it is. From that, we fund about 5,000 people. We have 16 research centers, world leading, which I'll talk about, and about 750 projects. From that, we create about 40,000 jobs every year, about 40,000 jobs, publish about 5,000 papers, 1,800 collaborations with companies equally split between small and large companies, do about 15 spin-outs a year, license about 84 technologies, and leverage more or less the same amount as the state's budget. We'd like that to be 2 to 1, file about 100 patents, and have a number of international collaborations and outreaches into every Irish school. I'm going to talk about 3 programs very briefly, but they're about impact. They're about doing excellent research that is impactful, the demonstrable effect that excellent research makes to the society and the economy. The first of those is SFI Research Centres. Excellence in Ireland is distributed. You will not find a university that looks like Oxford or Cambridge or Harvard or Yale or MIT, but you will find excellent people in different subjects in all of the Irish universities. We mandate that they have to work together. They have to work together with industry, and they have to be competitive internationally. So for these 16 centres, we fund about 700 million. They have to get 700 million in cash from their company collaborators, and they have to win 700 million from non-Irish exchequer sources. For that, read EU programmes or medical charities like the Gates Foundation. All of the universities in Ireland, all collaborating on a focused topic. And here are the topics. These are the 16 centres, and you can see that they're important for Ireland's economy: digital content, advanced materials, microbiome, which is #1 in the world, circular economy, broadband, down to insight data analytics, the largest data analytics centre in Europe, 800 people, and so on. So that's centres, really serious engagement with industry and spinning out about 10 to 20 companies every year. We then do partnerships with companies, simple rules, 50-50 at least co-funding between the industry and ourselves, no deadline, rolling call, and we don't get out of bed for less than €500,000, so these are projects of scale. But where I want to finish is this, which is actually our most impactful program, and that is that all science funders around the world have programs to allow people to go on to be the next generation professors or research leaders, and we have those. But in every country around the world, more than 90% of the output of a university goes to work in industry. Less than 5% are re-employed by the university. We are not infinitely expanding universities anywhere in the world. So we have a program for the 90% of people as well as for the 5%, and that's our industry fellowship. And in summary, we will fund any researcher in Ireland to spend up to 1 year in a company anywhere in the world doing collaborative research. They have to be in a company, they can be anywhere in the world, and they have to do research. It's not for cleaning the windows or making coffee. We don't care if the company's in Ireland or if it's overseas. In my book, there are only 2 sorts of companies that are in Ireland and companies that are not yet in Ireland. So we're interested in both of those. And there's no golden handcuffs at the end. They can stay with a company, they can stay overseas, they can come back to Ireland or what have you. We fund 300 or 400 of these every year. They are very successful in placing people both in large and small companies. People go out, they have a prestigious fellowship, they get the experience, they know what it's like to work in a company, and most of them, 99% of them, stay in the industrial sector, and those that return to the university come back with the experience. If anybody in Austria is interested in recruiting any Irish researchers to a company, the LinkedIn page is at the bottom. It's dead easy. You go down there, you'll find about 400 CVs of people saying, hi, I'm John, I'm an electrical engineer, I'd like to work in a small company or a big company or what have you. And then there's a simple application. So what I hope I've done is give you a bit of a flavor of that. I'm going to close with 2 slides from the World Economic Forum from a report of last month that looks at the markets of the future, 20 possible markets in these 3 buckets. And they talk about the conditions that are important for these markets. And I'm going to draw attention to 2 of them. One is invention, so that's the clever people that you have in the universities. And the second, which is in the next column, is innovation around socio-institutional structures. That's changing universities, changing ecosystems, changing government to foster these new creative industries that will massively disrupt and create a huge value for the economy. Essentially, the missing trillions that I speak about in the title slide. So thank you very much for your attention. Very happy to take any questions.
We have quite a lot of discussions going on in the chat, so I'll start with Bassem. He kicked off one discussion and asking, is there a plan how to reduce the time amount for the IP regulations between universities, public institutions and spin-offs? I think this is quite a demanding point, especially when IPs and licenses are the only way to earn money for non-profit organizations. And then there was one answer from Ingrid. Let me just quickly find it down the chat. She's then answering to him, convincing universities to take equity in their spin-offs would go a long way towards simplifying the IP transfer process. And I think Yasmin, you have a question in this context.
And I would also have a question, Mark. If you invest with the EIC, would you prefer to invest in a spin-off that has a license agreement with its university, or where the university is shareholder, or where there is a mixture of both?
We have a technical issue. Mark cannot hear us currently. Mark, can you hear us?
I can hear you now. I can just hear you now. Yeah.
Okay, sorry.
Okay.
Then, did you hear my question or?
No,
okay.
No, I just.
Sorry for the inconvenience. So I'll repeat that. We have a discussion going on in the chat around the IP. Is there a plan how to reduce the time amount for the IP regulations between universities, public institutions, and spin-offs? I think this is a quite demanding point, especially when IPs and licenses are the only way to earn money for non-profit organizations. Bassem raised that question, and then Ingrid answered and continued this discussion. Convincing universities to take equity in their spin-offs would go a long way towards simplifying the IP transfer process. And Yasmin has a question in this context.
Yeah, I would like to add and ask you, if you invest with the EIC, Mark, would you prefer to invest in a spin-off that has a license agreement with its university, or where the university has a stake in a company, or where there is a mixture of both?
Okay, thank you for the questions. I'll make a couple of comments. First of all, I'll answer from Ireland, and then I will answer for the EIC. In Ireland, we have a national intellectual property protocol. Because there are 8 universities, we don't want there to be different rules and regulations for each one, particularly since our centres span them. So we have a national protocol, a national template agreements that all universities should use, so that if a company is trying to negotiate with more than one Irish university, they're not spending a huge amount of time. It's all out of the same template. The guiding principle is very simple, and that is that we understand what the international rules are. Herman talked about it earlier, about 5%. And the message from me as the head of the agency is I am more interested in repeat business than I am in trying to get the last nickel or dime from people. So I want everybody to license the technology and take an equity stake on internationally competitive terms that are marginally generous towards the industry. And I quote very carefully, marginally generous towards the industry or the founder, because I want people to have a good experience and I want them to do it again or come back for more. In terms of the EIC, Of course, the companies would need to have the intellectual property. Doesn't matter whether it's licensed, whether it's assigned from the university. In my own case, when I did a spin out from the University of Manchester in the UK, I actually took assignment of the intellectual property. The university took an equity stake in the company. I did a pipeline agreement because they didn't want me to resign as a professor, though I wanted to be the CEO of the company. And actually, they did very well. They never invested any money, but when the company was sold, they made double-digit millions, and they were happy with that. So I think licensing or assignment is fine, but you do need the intellectual property.
Mark, Irena is asking, Irene Fier, because still not many Austrian universities take stakes in their spin-offs. We understood it's important, but she's asking, why do you think that's the case?
Well, I can tell you from experience in Ireland and elsewhere that, first of all, people are worried about having a stake in a high-risk company. I don't really understand that because it's their own company, it's their own high risk. But the finance people are often, it goes on their books and they sort of look at that. My view is that this is actually really quite important. I mean, it's an important metric for the university. If you look at the leading universities in the world, they'll talk about their publications and their professors, but they'll also talk about their spin-out companies, and they'll also talk about the value of those companies. And sometimes they'll talk about how much money they've made in them. What I think is really important, though, is the assignment of the intellectual property and the assignment of the time. You're not asking the university necessarily to take the equity, to buy the equity in cash. You're saying you assign this value and you get this part of the company. It's therefore in your interest to try and help this company grow and so on. So I actually think that's an important facet. But people take different views. Some of them want to license, some of them want to take equity, do assignment. Both are fine. Okay.
Matthias Schuler has a question. Met Uni, one university, runs its technology transfer through an own private-owned company called VET Vidi Forschungsholding GmbH. It's a private-owned company. In your experience, is this the better way to go than internal department? And does such a construct make it easier to take equity in spin-offs?
So I think a lot of this depends on the people. I mean, there are technology transfer offices in the UK and Ireland that work brilliantly well, and there are some that work brilliantly awfully. So it really depends on the people and on the facilitation. So either works. I mean, either having an external company or having someone internal do it. What I think is important is that these are high quality people. They put focus on it, that they help the academic. You know, the academic needs to decide, do they want to leave and be part of the company? Do they want to be an advisor to the company? Do they want something to do with it going forward? Again, all of those are all workable, but it's really important that there are professional people there who are networked into the right investors, who can bring them along, who can help the company develop, and who can actually move the volume forward. One comment I would make, and it's been something in Ireland that we've improved, I'm much more interested in the volume. I'm more interested in getting these companies out quickly. And a very common comment that says is, well, we might give away $1 billion company. And my answer to that is that would be a first, because we don't have any $1 billion companies. So if you gave one away, that would be progress. So you don't want to be worried about that. What you want to be worried about is getting it all out there. And the American experience shows very clearly that if you are founder friendly and company friendly, people will give you, by way of a donation, much more money back as a kind of good feeling from where they came. So I think being straightforward about it, being simple, not obsessing about, trying to screw down every nickel and dime, but more or less having standard template agreements that we have and moving the stuff out there and getting it moving. It's really important.
Great. As a chair of the EIC Advisory Board, what do you think were the most interesting spin-off ecosystems that you would like to invest? Where are the hotspots that we can orient our focus on?
So I think Europe has tremendous potential. I mean, as I said in the presentation, we are not as well developed as the United States. But in a way, that's a good thing, because if we were as well developed but performing 50 times less, that would be a bigger problem. So I think we've got a real opportunity to develop. If you look, there are league tables, they tend to be clustered around where there are high-quality universities and a density of industry. In Austria, you'll see things around Vienna, for example, in Ireland, around Dublin. Those can all be grown. I think there's also opportunity in the new EU member states. If you look carefully at that graph I showed you, you'll see quite a lot of those companies that are in the list that didn't quite get the funding but got the seal of excellence. And what that tells me is there's real potential there, but if you can kind of nurture or mentor them in a very highly competitive situation, they will come through. So personally, I think Europe has the wherewithal. We have the scientific brains. We have the backbone of the industry. We have really important opportunities in the green technologies, in some of the things Herman talked about, quantum computing, AI, and so on. We just need to get on and do it. We need to create that ecosystem. And I hope that the EIC will go some step towards catalyzing the private investors, catalyzing people, and I really hope it will incentivize university presidents that they will want to see EIC awards as well as ERC awards for their institutions.
Mark, fantastic. Thank you for your insights. Thank you for this Q&A, and thank you, our dear audience, for asking and engaging these questions. We'll be continuing to bring them on to our speakers. Mark, thank you very, very much for being with us, and goodbye.